Welcome to this feedback video on the Building with Nature design assignment. My name is Grace, and today I will explain how to assess a Building with Nature design and how to provide your peers with constructive feedback. We will work with the example of the Dollard Dyke in Delfzijl, the Netherlands. We will start by checking that the assignment includes the case title and location. Next, we will check that at least 4 functional requirements are included. In this case, they include being able to withstand a storm surge with an exceedance level of 1 in 10,000 per annum, which determines the height of the crest. Second, the seaward side of the dike should resist erosion by waves. Third, the dike should conserve or even restore existing nature. Finally, the structure should also provide opportunities for nature to thrive. These requirements are sufficient for this example. The next step is to assess the design of the conventional solution. We can see that the example includes the seaward and landward directions and elements such as the grass and the road on the landward side. Also, the expected wave height is explicitly included. The sketch also explains that the dike's berm would be covered in grass in an attempt to prevent erosion. Overall, this work meets the requirements of a sketch for the conventional solution. After assessing the conventional design, we move on to the Building with Nature alternative. This example includes elements such as the crest level, the grass, the road, and the clay core. The expected wave height is explicitly included. Sheep are included to keep the grass short, but no other changes over time are included. Moreover, the use of an eco-concrete outer berm does not necessarily represent a Building with Nature solution. Let's have a look at another sketch. We can see that in this solution, 2 Building with Nature measures are clearly specified. Measure 1 consists in raising the bed and using salt marsh as an outer berm to reduce wave-based erosion. Measure 2 considers populations of sheep and hogs as part of the management plan for the dike. On one hand, the sheep mow the grass, keeping it short and in good condition. On the other hand, by catching mice, hogs prevent mice from making too many holes in the dike, preventing long-term damage to the structure. By explaining these measures, the example specifies the change of the structure over time. Overall, this sketch meets the requirements of a Building with Nature design. Now that we are familiar with the proposed Building with Nature design, we will assess the application of the engineering design principles. First, we assess whether 4 principles were scored in the last 2 checkboxes and explain. In the first example, only 1 principle was scored as maximum. In the second example, only 3 explanations are provided. After checking that sufficient principles are scored and explained, we encourage you to provide more detailed feedback and discuss with your peers how your design compares with theirs. We start by checking that all explanations are placed in the appropriate boxes. In this form, for instance, an explanation for Principle 9 is provided in the box for Principle 2. Similarly, the box for Principle 9 contains an explanation of Principle 2. Afterwards, we check that each explanation is consistent with the checkbox that was chosen, such as Principle 6 in the example. Next, we make sure that sufficient explanation is provided for the scoring of each principle. For instance, for the reliability principle, the role of the sheep in keeping the grass short, which in turn maintains the cover of the dike, could have been mentioned. Finally, a very important point. Check that your peer has evaluated the Building with Nature design and not the conventional solution. Did you notice that this form was completed with a conventional solution in mind? Let's move on to the ecological design principles. Once again, we check that sufficient principles are scored, and we make sure that those principles are also explained. In this case, we expect you to consider at least 5 ecological design principles and have ranked them in the last 3 boxes. Next, we ask the following questions. Is the Building with Nature design evaluated rather than the conventional solution? Are the explanations placed in the correct boxes? Do the explanations match the scoring of the principal? Is sufficient explanation provided for each choice? Once we have evaluated these 5 aspects, we encourage you to provide more detailed feedback on the principles. For example, in this form, we chose to provide feedback on Principles 7 and 8. Instead of using a concrete berm, the design could have included a raised foreshore vegetated with salt marsh, providing opportunities for ecological succession and increasing zone integrity. After providing this feedback, we are ready for the final step, monitoring and risk assessment. In the example, 2 building with nature solutions were provided. However, no monitoring or risk assessment was considered. In this case, the design should include monitoring of the condition of the dike, of the hog population, and of the salt marsh. In addition, because of recent earthquakes in the region, it should also include a seismological risk assessment. Let's now consider the trade-offs. Please check that your peer included at least 2 trade-offs and has described these in terms of engineering and ecological principles. This example identified that the long-term increase in salt marsh zone integrity and ecological succession came at the cost of increased disturbance and potentially higher costs in the short term. Moreover, because no standard method is available to guarantee the performance of the salt marsh as flood defense, the design is based primarily on model predictions. Now you know how to assess a building with nature design in terms of its functional requirements and the application of the engineering and ecological design principles. I encourage you to use this knowledge to complete the peer review assignment. Remember that all feedback should be respectful and constructive. Good luck with completing your assignment.